I love going to car shows because it's like going through a time warp.
If anything, it's dangerous for the other drivers on the road because it's like a
Yeah.
long beam of blinding light that just shoots out. Now, headlights in general have gotten brighter to the point where I can't
Yes.
tell if people have their high beams on all the time. What was your first
Ooh.
car?
So my first official car is a 1967 Pontiac Firebird.
A 1996 Hyundai Elantra.
Not the muscle car from the
No.
60s. No.
Hmm. I have to imagine that you probably drove to school listening to that in your car.
I wish.
No,
No, I was sitting there
no.
saying that take, I'm a little younger than that,
Okay.
so, but I was sitting there thinking,
It's
I was
still a
like,
good tune.
how great would it have been
There you
to,
go.
to be 16 in 1985
And
in
driving
your
to school.
in your
Oh.
IROC Camaro with your T tops taken out, and you had added your booming sub in the back, and you cruise in to "We're Not Gonna Take It" into high school. That
Ah.
we have
Just
just
like
written the opening scene to a movie right there.
sounds like Animal House. I don't,
It's
it could
so
be
good.
something
Yeah, we need it's
along
an
those
80,
lines.
80s
It's
era
just
version of Animal
right.
House,
It's just
We'll call it
oh
IROC, and
yeah,
we'll
right.
cruise in with our
Oh
IROC
my goodness.
Camaro.
Oh, flowing hair. We got metal hair, right?
Yes,
Of course.
yes,
Oh man.
yes,
Long
yeah, and
streaky.
yeah, and but then you got the guys and the gals in the parachute pants and the green hair, flipping him off when he came in. We want new wave, man. Gosh,
Oh my God, this might
I
be
would
the best
watch that
start
movie.
to an episode ever. Very
That's the
clearly.
type of movie I want to watch right there.
A movie I want to be in.
Yeah, new wave versus the heavy metal kids.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Doug Marsh alongside myself, Rob Stott. We're here talking cars on the Twisted Era podcast this time around. And there's a lot of great ways to go with this. The first thing that comes to mind at the risk of derailing us super early on, your first car. What was your first
Ooh,
car?
yeah. So my first official car is a 1967 Pontiac Firebird. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Smokey.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. Yeah, I wish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
that
A
it's that
little
was
later,
mine. Yeah,
right?
mine's 10 years before his,
Right.
but it
But
was still black
holy
like his,
hell,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it was a very interesting, I turned 16 in 89, and I was 15 when we got it. And dad we had started working, had to get a car. And I think I had a job, and he was like, we'll find something inexpensive that you can pay us, $100 a month or whatever. And so we started looking. I remember we ended up finding a 68 that was white. We brought it home, and it was leaking oil like crazy, and like, man, never mind. Took
Not
that
gonna
one
work.
back. And then we found this one, and this one was, like I say, it was a 67. It had recently been repainted. Not very
Oh,
well, I might add, but it was but I think I gave maybe 2 grand total for it.
wow.
And it it's one of those things like these, say you can go so many different directions,
Oh
but
yeah.
car shows of today where you'll see, Counts Customs or somebody will be like, "Hey, my first car was this. I want love for you to modernize it." That would be incredible to go back and
Yeah.
get my 67 because
Oh.
interior was junk, right? We'll sit there and it
Go
was
go pimp
it
my ride that thing.
yes, exactly. I
Like,
want it to look
yeah.
like what mine looked like on the outside, but I want it inside to have modern comfort. You know what I
Oh,
mean? But
absolutely.
yeah, that was it. And
Wow.
it was I only had it for
That,
maybe a year and a half.
that was my
It
follow-up.
was
How long did it
yeah,
last you?
yeah, it died not,
Mm.
I kept it for about a year, but to be fair, the second car, in my opinion, granted, 67 Firebird is super cool, but
Right.
the second car, my dad had gotten um, Acura. starts in 86. So in 86, they put a couple of cars out, but by 87, they were really hitting their stride.
Mm-hmm.
And the Integra was this two-door little sports car type thing.
Yep.
And they had put out special editions. They called it literally the special. And it was white with white wheels,
Ooh,
white painted wheels.
slick.
So it was just white and black
Yeah.
all the way around. And it had been wrecked. And the guy had
Yeah.
fixed it. And so we got,
Good
fairly
deal.
good deal. And my
Pre-Carfax
dad,
days. So
exactly.
I mean, he
Well,
tells
yeah.
you
Oh,
the honor system.
yeah. My dad knew the guy who had built it,
Yeah,
he had
there you go.
rebuilt the thing. So, but anyway, we got it, got back and got a pretty good deal. And that was
Yeah.
my second car. And if you could look
Wow.
up a 1987 or 1988 Acura Integra LS Special or something like that in white, you will see it. And it still looks cool to this day.
Ooh.
But
It had the little
yeah,
black strip down the side. Did yours have the
it's
black
got it.
strip or
Mine,
without the black strip?
I think mine was white. I
All white.
remember white, white, white. I had black spoiler on the back, which was kind of spongy. It wasn't a hard. It was weird. It was a little softer. I don't know what was going on there. But yeah, it was a
Flip
cool car.
lights?
So yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah, little
yeah,
flip
and
lights.
and it's so stupid. You would flip them up just all the time because you thought it looked cool. But yeah, that was So I had the six.
That's what you consider your first like car?
So
Like,
67
yeah,
Firebird
Firebird.
for a year or so, and then for gosh, probably the next 10 years, I had that 87 until
Wow.
I actually got a job and bought my first car. So yeah, so
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I know your dad was in the
Yeah.
car business,
Yep.
so I will be curious to see what your
Well,
first car was.
it wasn't a 67 Firebird, that's for damn sure. He's like, listen, you're a 16-year-old kid. I know what you're getting into. We're
Yeah.
yeah, actually, first car, hand me down. So I had my grandmother in high school passed away when I was a freshman, and my dad took in her car. And they held it for me, so her car became my first car, which was kind of a little sentimental value to it. I had it for about
Absolutely.
three years or so. Like when I say she didn't drive the thing, I got it. So we're talking junior-ish year of high school. I
Mm-hmm.
a little delayed in getting my license.
Okay.
I did the test and everything when I was 16. So PA, I'm sure how maybe we can get into the driving aspect of this too. For
Yeah.
me, it was I had to get my learner's permit. You can get that
Sure.
when you're 16. You have
Yeah.
to have it for a 6 month period
Yeah.
before you're able to test for your license. So
Gotcha.
I get it when I'm a little older than 16. I turned 16, and wrestling high school, I was like full
Sure.
blown in on wrestling. So my attention was on that. I had rides figured out. I wasn't in like dire need of having
Gotcha.
a car.
Yeah.
So do the test. I took my driver's test like a year later. So, like I
Okay.
had my permit for almost a year before I took the actual test.
Yeah.
But so the car sat around waiting for me to the point where I think there was like a squirrel's nest in the engine or something like that. Like we had to get it had to get, cleaned up and all that sort of stuff. But a 1996 Hyundai Elantra. So, that's my first car. So,
So yeah. So
Frank
not
windows,
not the muscle car from the
No,
60s. No.
certainly not.
No. Yeah.
Certainly not. In fact, I'll tell you, I've never owned a muscle car, so it's never been in the menu of cars or the
Well,
roster, I guess, of
there
cars. It's not on
there's
my
our
resume.
that's our first takeaway from this episode, Twisted Arrows. We'd love to hear if anybody else has ever owned a
Oh,
cool muscle car,
I don't. My mom's might have been a Firebird too, her first car.
Uh,
So that's an interesting little connection
mhm.
there. But she's got some great pictures of her like standing next to it when she was in high school
Oh
and
yeah.
stuff. She's like I know Corvettes were big in our area too. There's like a Corvette club of Philly that she was a part of for a while with like
Nice.
neighbors and so not me. I guess they
No,
lived it
you
and they
got
were
the
like, no, you
Hyundai.
got the Hyundai. And it did well for me. I took it to college.
Same.
You
They're on
know,
the same low.
I
Yeah,
know, like
yeah, yeah.
I whatever. Um, but I will tell you too, dad in the car business, I've learned not to get too attached to cars. So, I know early on I didn't take care of them too well, so like that was part of it.
Uh-huh.
So, but I think my car count because of a
Oh,
dad in the business, when he needs a sale to hit a bonus, it's like, all right, we're gonna swap Rob out of this car and get another
oh,
sale real quick and
that's great.
hit a level. So I'm probably in like the dozen range of cars so like
Wow.
that I've driven or owned or
Yes.
I maybe more. I could probably at the risk of boring y'all and rattling them off. Mostly SUVs, but like
Okay.
Chevy Cruises in there. More recently, we're on like the Buick GMC. Also, it depends on the type of delership he's at, right? Like
When
Chevy
he
dealership, I
changed
got Chevy.
job, we got different
Yeah.
brands. There you
I've
go.
had an Explorer, I've had a
Yeah.
Blazer, so we've been all over
Yes.
the map.
Yes. He's working
Yeah,
both sides. There. That's
I
great. Yeah.
had a Honda, the hatchback, the Crossfire, Cross Tour.
Yeah.
Was one. Right now I'm in like a Ford Fusion. While the wife, so I've got that while the wife has a GMC. I think it's the Terrain, like whatever the bigger SUV is. It's similar
Yeah.
to like, we were in a Buick for a while, Buick GMC, and
Mm-hmm.
kids. It is what it is. You got to fit kids in
Yeah.
the back of the car, and something that can handle all seasons here in Philly. So like we've got
That's true.
snow on
Yeah.
occasion. It's supposed to snow today, so we'll see. But we haven't had a good snow in a while, but something that can handle it, handle the weather. So,
Just an FYI, it
yeah,
is November, and you said that there is a possibility of snow. So
I
that
know.
typically does not happen here in the South. So thank
No.
goodness. You know,
And y'all just get a dusting before it
so
throws you off
needless
the
to
road.
exactly. So in the last, let's see here, that's an interesting way to look at it as well. It's like, yes, those were my first two, but what else have I had? And
Oh,
once you get, I turned my '87 Integra into a '95 Integra. That's
hmm
still one of my favorite cars ever. But then when you get married, you kind of like, okay, I'm gonna get rid of my car. I'm gonna take my wife's car and get her a new car. And you get this,
yep.
kind
Oh
of thing
yeah,
going
the
on.
cycle
So
of
I had,
life.
yeah. So I had her Civic for a while,
hmm
and then in I think it was '05, I hit the jackpot and I bought an '03 Honda S2000,
Ooh, yeah.
which is one of the coolest cars ever made. It is amazing. If you when you see them still on the road now, you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
that's so cool, And I kept it for a very long time, and then I've essentially been a convertible guy for the last 20 years. So I had that convertible, and then I got an old man convertible, I call it the Solero, I
Oh
think
yeah.
from Toyota.
Okay.
It was big and
Yep.
bulky and slow, and I kept it for a few years. I was like, I don't like this, and so now I'm in a hot rod, a BMW convertible,
Nice.
that 2 Series that is it's got to you say this every time. It's got to be the best car ever made. It's just
hmm
so nice. But yeah, for the last 20 years, I have been a convertible person, which
Yeah.
will probably is not as big a deal up north as it
Yeah,
is in the south.
sunroofs, you know.
You got
We got
sunroofs,
sunroofs.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
open them up here and there. What's
yeah.
fun about like the upgrades that I've gone through
Hmm.
is like I've always been about 10 years behind the tech
Gotcha.
because of the cars I'm
Yes,
driving. Like I know what's
yes,
out there, and obviously being a fan of technology and traveling to CESs and stuff, I
yeah.
cars have taken over that show. We
Oh,
talk about
I
car shows.
imagine.
That's kind of
Yeah,
turning into one between autonomous driving and like the things you see in car audio used to be a big part
yeah.
of it, not so much anymore. But um, so I see all the latest tech, and then I go home and I'm driving, cars that have crank windows, like this and that. So but now my current car finally has a little backup cam, 2012, so I'm getting into the backup cam era where it's just on the rear
Yes.
view mirror, the corner of the rear view mirror as I'm backing up, where the wife's got the big old screen and everything. She's got like a HD 40-inch whatever, like
Yes.
can
You can
see what's
watch
going on.
movies on that thing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Not me on my little 2-inch rear view mirror. But I'm
Yes.
catching up. That's the cool part is that at some point I'll have a car that
Well,
uh,
that's an interesting aspect as well, is like, so in 1988, I was 15 when my dad bought,
Mhm.
the 67 Firebird, which was 20 years. And in that 20 years between 67 and 88, it is a
how they've
different
changed.
world. It
Yeah.
is unreal. You look at this and you're like, man, this is from, I don't even know. If you do
Back
that,
to the future.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's this is if you do that now, we're closing in on
Oh,
2025, and you look at a 2005, it looks pretty much the same.
yeah.
It's not, the
Not
the
too terribly different.
it's not too terrible. The SUV is going to look like an SUV. The sedan is going to look like a sedan. There's no sports cars very much anymore. So, I'm not trying to give away my ending, but cars today are pretty boring
They're more about what's
outside.
inside,
They
right?
are
Like
much
it's
more about
yeah,
what's inside than
yeah.
what's outside.
The
And
only
granted, safety is huge. I get it, so they're much safer now, but the inside is
Mhm.
just
That's where the
unreal what
upgrades
they've
are
done.
happening, and if anything, a more recent trend, and it's a very minor detail of a car, not really from a functional perspective, but headlights.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I don't want to give credit to the Cybertruck. I don't. But I'm starting to see on the road, especially on SUVs, more of the light that goes all the way across the front.
Yep.
So I don't. That's just becoming a thing. So I don't know if it's like a we want to look more technical or imitation's the best form of flattery type deal.
Or they're
But
trying to look like Cylons from Battlestar
right,
Galactica. Yeah,
right. Like I
that
don't
could be
get it.
scary.
Just I like
That's
if anything, it's dangerous for the other drivers on the road because it's like a
yeah.
long beam of blinding light that just shoots out. Now, headlights in general have gotten brighter to the point where I can't
Yes.
tell if people have their high beams on all the time
And
or
when you give
if,
them the flash and then
right,
they
like
like kill you because they
yeah, because
didn't
they
have them
didn't have
on,
a
you're like, oh my
oh,
gosh.
like we need to chill out. But
But
oh
just think about that. So in the 70s, Battlestar Galactica comes out and the Cylons have these red lights that go
yeah,
back and forth. Maybe it's actually the
it might
Cybertruck
be.
that's the true Cylon.
They've made
Wow.
it. I always knew Elon was a villain. So,
Wow, wow.
yeah, right.
You talk about the tech of your 2012 is not terribly far. Granted that they've gotten really crazy in the modern stuff, but it's still perfect. You
Mhm.
still function in this. Mine is about 9 years old, and the tech in mine is I don't even know that I would want to go any further. If you know what I mean, it's like I've got everything that you would ever need, but nothing too crazy that they're going forward. What is it going to be like in 20 years?
Right. Well,
We're
I mean, you keep
you're
seeing
just
these
going to
concept cars, right? Of like,
yes.
I mean, the big push, and I know there's a lot that has to happen from a regulatory perspective and a battery perspective as well,
Sure,
right?
sure.
Which I'll get to in a second because there's some cool things from the battery perspective. But regulatory, it's the autonomous driving and
Hmm.
making sure that we're at that weird intersection of like there's this increase of cars that can drive on their own and people that still drive on their own
Right.
like or so we'll throw air quotes around people that drive um so they can't coexist. Like it's just it's hard for them to
Yeah.
but that's where you see like the cars that don't have steering wheels on the inside or like the autonomous city buses that are rolling around again see just to cite them CES the show floor they've got what feels like you're stepping into a subway car but it's actually a bus that's rolling on wheels and can go to the next stop. It knows its route, it's predetermined and has all the sensors and everything, the technology built into it so that they can navigate roads um, as well as they can. I mean, you still see stories out there of people getting hit by these things because
Hmm.
the car can only do so much. If you're going to step out in front of it, I don't know who's at fault, truly.
Hmm.
Um, but that's the I think the direction you'll see is more of that like the driverless functionality or safety features is really what it's kind of boiling down to from that perspective. I think.
That leads me into I use the word car culture, for
Yeah.
example, and that is like completely foreign to the idea of, say, a car show. We talked about how
Oh,
cool
yeah.
car shows are. When you go to a car show today, it's the same cars that they've been doing at car shows for the last 40
Next year's
years.
model.
Yeah. But like if you go to the local car show,
Yeah, yeah.
it is completely, different,
It's more about
because it's more
the
about the
classic
past.
cars. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And you go to a car show and you're like, the most modern thing you may see is going to be something that's trying to mimic the past.
Yeah.
So like a new modern Corvette or something like that. Or, in the 10, 15 years ago when Dodge put out Chargers and Challengers to make it look like the past. You'll see those. But the majority of what you see is the same cars that were at the car show in 1960,
Yeah.
60s era cars, 70s era cars. They
Hmm.
had style. They had, just look. They're almost, some of them are like pieces of art because it's so
So many concept
different.
cars. Were concept cars
Yeah,
always a big deal?
concept
To
cars
like,
were always a big deal, but concept cars were going to be built for, we're going to build this
yeah,
eventually.
not like we want to show something off and it's never going to
Right.
see the road.
Exactly. A lot of
um,
what we have is based on concept cars that they would bring to a show and be like, yeah, this is what we're going to put out. But I love going to car shows because it's like going through a time warp, man.
oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
You know?
Now, does Philly's got a big one? It's
Hmm.
usually every January, February time range. They do a whole black tie event for like the car industry. Dad being in
Wow.
the car, like used to get invited to the black tie shows, so we'd always get tickets, and they bring celebrities in, and like
That's
whether it
awesome.
was like local athletes or one year Kurt Angle was at
Hmm.
the Philly one, so like I remember meeting him. Um, you know, they do stuff like that, and it's a spectacle,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I did get to attend as a member of the press, a few years ago when I was with the magazine in the city and got to cover it from a because they're becoming more of like concept techie,
Sure.
right? So
Yep.
you see the autonomous stuff and there's the other like less audio at those shows, but they're still looking at ways to involve technology into what's happening within the car. So it's a different experience. To your point, I don't
Hmm.
remember. It takes up it's got that convention center feel, but like just one giant car dealership showroom is what it feels like,
Right.
as opposed to like an actual event that you want to go to check out what's new and exciting or
Right.
to enjoy. Like it feels
Yeah.
like you're car shopping as opposed to just like enjoying an event.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I, I, I love cars, so I do look at those, but I am much more interested in the like hot rod type shows where I
Yeah.
know in, we worked together at a company that was based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And for a while during the July 4th weekend, they would have, there was an event there in downtown Winston that had, like rockabilly music.
Hmm.
It was this kind of rockabilly festival, and they would have this hot rod, show. And it eventually took over two or three streets, and one of them was in front of the building that we worked
Wow.
at. And it was
Yeah.
so it was so cool to
Yeah.
like we had moved into this new building, and then there were hot rods in front of it,
That's
and
awesome.
so I've got a
A
few
little
shots
distracting,
of,
I have to imagine.
yeah. Well, it was on
Oh,
Saturday.
yeah,
It was
that's right.
only
That's
on
right. So
Saturday.
not during work
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, but like there in front of our old building, which we had
Yep.
we had saved an old building, was an old,
Oh,
uh um uh,
historical landmark.
old, a classic old car. And I
Yeah.
was like, if I walked in 1972, this would have been the same picture because you'd have this old
That's
building and this old car sitting in front of it. So
so
that
cool.
was really cool too. And I wonder, as you talk about how we, tech and classic, people driven versus autonomous driving, how will this change those sorts of car shows? You know
Right?
what I mean? Because,
Be run by AI.
it's
The
going to be
robots are going to be
weird,
running it. Right?
because you get crazy down the path. And I don't want to, but at some point in time, you have the whole idea of gas versus electric.
Right.
And if whichever wins, the other will be out essentially.
Yeah.
And if electric wins all these classic cars, it's not like you're
What
going to
happens
put
to
a,
them? Right.
yeah,
Where are
you
they going to
know,
go?
what are, I just, so that's an interesting aspect as
Yeah, man,
well.
the flip of like when gas state if
If,
electric wins, which it
yeah,
right, it feels like maybe I know there's you can look at the political spectrum and what people are
sure,
doing, right? So that
yeah,
there was a push, there may not be a push over the next few years. Um, ultimately, it's not like the world's I say this, right? The world's not going to run out of gas. But
right,
you know, the idea being that from a technology or an environmental standpoint, there is a
sure,
cleaner energy.
sure,
But so like, does it ever get to an inflection point where, as hard as it is to find those charging stations today, which
right.
they're becoming more prevalent, um, what's it going to be like when that happens to gas stations and
Right.
gas stations go away? You're gonna have to drive, drive your electric car with a gas tank in the back and fill it up
Right.
to bring home to fill up your car. But yeah, I mean, and that gets to the point too. I alluded to as I was talking about the autonomous stuff, but electric cars I've seen and there's been examples of there may even be one in use. I don't think it's in the US. I think it's likely China.
Mm-hmm.
Of roads that are built to charge the car while it's driving. Like that's the type of thing that's going to have to exist. So the type of infrastructure where,
Mm-hmm.
right now it's all right, let me charge up my Tesla at home
Right.
and map out my you're not thinking cross country, but if you were, you'd have to map
Right.
it out by all the stops you'd have to make to charge. Um, and then there's of course, the long term struggle around like how long does the battery last, and you got to swap out the
Right.
battery. How much is the battery going to? They're not cheap right now at all.
Right.
So there's a lithium discussion that's there, and like what is the next battery technology? Because 10 years ago, that was the talk of CES is what's going to
Oh
replace
yeah.
lithium
Yeah.
eventually, because there's got to be a more efficient, you know, cell powering technology
Lighter.
out
That
there.
thing is too heavy. It's
Mhm.
just
So
you're
weight,
trying to
it's
figure
like
out weight.
it degrades over time too.
Yep. Yeah.
They don't last for. Think of your phone, your iPhone. It's like clockwork. Every 2 years, the battery stops charging or holding a charge
Yeah.
as well, right? It happens with cars. Cold weather, it doesn't run as well. Like things like weather
Nowhere.
impacting. I granted today you could say weather impacts how you drive because of road conditions, but like you don't think about I guess you think about your battery like dying in cold weather, but not impacting
But
how
once it's going,
long
you're
you're right.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
That
you're not worried about that kind of stuff. So that's where it's interesting to follow those
sure.
electric car
We're
discussions because of all that.
what's funny is if you really dive into it, uh, we didn't really talk much about the introduction of cars, but the little steam powered.
Yeah.
They started way back when, but it's like I think in the 1860s or 1870s when they start really looking into, hey, we can do this with a single engine or whatever. But at the time, yeah, I think in the early 1900s, electric cars were also a thing,
Hmm.
and they were
Yeah.
trying to figure out which way was going to work, and they were just nowhere near ready.
Right.
I don't even
Right.
think they were running on battery. They would start it with a battery or something. It was weird, But one of the huge companies, maybe like a Studebaker or something like that. Oh, somebody, was running electric cars back in the day,
So
and
the first crude electric carriages. Do you want to
yeah,
guess the year they were made?
was probably 1700s or something like that. Probably
1820. 1820.
1820. Yeah,
Practical commercially available vehicles, uh, electric vehicles appeared in 1890.
there you
Um,
go.
then an electric vehicle held the vehicular land speed record until
Yep.
1900.
Yeah.
There's that. Of course, I mean, of of course, you think about
Of
it.
course.
The design of electric motors, influenced heavily early on by one Benjamin Franklin,
He
so a Philly
was
guy.
a Philly
I
guy.
mean, he stands out there with his, kite on a lightning rod. Figures out how to charge a battery, but yeah, I mean,
It
it's
could,
they've been around.
yes.
They've been around.
That's
So,
awesome. Yeah, good old. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So it is Studebaker in
mhm.
1902, electric vehicles. And in '04 they
Yep.
came out with gas vehicles. And then they eventually disbanded the electric vehicle side. But yeah, so we hear this, oh, like, electric cars are new. I'm like,
Not really.
nothing's new, man. They've come
Nope.
up with,
What's old is new.
well, exactly, exactly. So we'll see, gasoline beat them 100 years ago. We'll see what happens now. Maybe another 100 years, electricity will finally figure out. I love the idea of charging going down the road is amazing, but then
Yeah.
the taxes are going to be gazillions of dollars to pay for this charging as
The
we do
other
it on the
thing,
road.
it's got to be out there, I have to imagine. But like the other thing I'm surprised of is we haven't seen like solar powered
Mm,
batteries on cars.
mm-hmm,
Like you're driving during the day mostly anyway, right? So
mm-hmm.
let your car battery charge while you're driving via a roof that is solar panels.
Sure.
Let the battery charge up, and then at night when there is no sun, um, you've got the stored power to go off of. Like
Yeah.
if it's not a thing, I need to go quickly trademark the crap out of.
We
I'm
need to
sure
figure it
someone's
out,
yeah,
right?
I know, I'm sure someone's working on it, but like that's got to be. It's just an
I mean,
alternative too.
seriously, there's other well, like even F1 harnesses power via brakes.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
storing
Friction,
energy.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And so like there's got to be ways to continue, hey, we charge this battery and this is going to get us this much. We
right.
have these four different things on the
And
car
we
that helps
kind of
us.
saw it with
Yeah.
hybrids too. Like I think of the Prius
Yeah.
early on. Like
Yeah.
wasn't that one of the first that the battery
Where
was
we
there as
we
a
can
backup, but
we can
like
utilize both worlds,
mhm,
which is, let's be honest, that's probably going to be the way that probably will be the winner to have a backup gasoline engine of some sort to be able to
yeah.
get you to an electric charging station of some sort. Or but that's a fascinating switch between uh the muscle car, the 67 Firebird that probably got 15 miles a gallon and no one cared,
Hmm.
to today. Let's
I
figure
I
out
mean,
how to
you'd have
get
to go.
the
I guess you'd have to. Inflation's a thing, but like you'd have to
sure.
go back to what gas cost in that day
Absolutely.
versus what it does
Nothing.
today. I
Yes.
know. So, that's part of the conversation for sure.
Hmm.
And the increasing costs of gasoline and to run a vehicle, whereas, I think the another reason for the increased interest, and you can't have a conversation around it without talking about Tesla and
Oh
what they've
yeah.
done. But the cost of electric vehicles are not what they were 10 years ago.
Hmm.
They're finding ways. It's like that, they've been looking for that silver bullet of like a mile marker that they can go. I think it was like 300. They wanted them to be able to go to 300 miles and be less
Right.
than 30,000. And we're about there. And so that's like the inflection point, right? Of like
Yep.
what's going to help mass or supposedly help mass adoption of them. Um, so, I mean, and you talk about the impact on car culture, like no longer the revving of engines. I know you can. They've got technology in them where you can make it sound like
It
as you're
actually
stepping
does
on the gas,
play through
right?
the speakers in your
Yeah,
car
it
to give
does.
you a
So
fake sound of,
so you
and
can
I was like,
still hear it, but
does that not tell you something though? It's like,
like
yeah,
there's
number one, we know this car isn't
people
cool.
crave that.
This is not
Right.
cool. So
No.
we're gonna make fake sounds
Yeah.
so that when you rev this, we're gonna make it feel like it's cool again.
Now,
That's wild.
have you sat in a Tesla? Have you sat or
One of
driven
my
around in?
one of my good friends has one, and he has moved, and so I have not even got to experience his
My
Tesla.
brother-in-law
So
has one and drove up or drove down rather New York, drove down to see us. And
mhm.
I've been in my dad drove one home once because he had it as a trade-in, needed to drive it around or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a story in and of itself, but because he got locked out
Oh
of it.
wow.
And like if your phone's
Yep.
dead, they've got the key card. They couldn't find the key card because the key card was in it.
Oh
Or something
gosh.
like that. So that like to get into the car was a whole deal. But there's no breaking into those things, unfortunately, unless you're going to just shatter the window.
Bam.
Um, you know, yeah, you can't pick a lock. So,
Mm.
but anyway, my brother-in-law drives down, and I finally got to, be in one and drive around in
Yeah.
it. It is an experience. It's almost like it feels like you're, and I know this is not a novel or new descriptor for it,
Yep.
but it feels like you're driving around in an iPhone. The way it
Interesting.
is, like just obviously the big tablet is a part of that, but
Yes.
functionally how the car works too. Like everything is through. There's very few controls on the wheel, and so, like everything from turning on your windshield wipers to your headlights to obviously the audio to turning the car, like certain functions of the car, if you want to adjust settings of the car, like it's all through this panel that is just right there next to you. And there are software updates to the car that get delivered over time, like over the air and things like that, where you got to make sure your car's plugged in overnight so that it can accept the update. And in the middle of updating, you can't drive. So if there is a software update, make sure you've got time blocked out. You're not doing this before you got to get out the door and get to work because your car will be sitting there updating. So it is like a massive mobile phone.
Wow.
And it's unique and it's got some really cool features of like things you're seeing in other cars today too, especially with a lot of the cameras everywhere. And they've got like the top down view that you can see as you're parallel parking and like get
Right.
all of that. And
That's some pretty
they've
wild
got
stuff. But the camera
cameras all
angles,
over where
yeah.
like you're driving, it'll capture moments almost like a blink camera. So it's like a smartphone, an iPhone mixed with a smart home security system on wheels, and
Wow.
it's cool. Like it is cool. So I get the novelty of it, but is it
Yeah.
just that? Like, is it a novelty? You
Right.
know, I don't know.
Hey.
I mean, you're seeing the explosion in popularity, and people are buying into it, and it's those early adopters that are,
Yeah.
when you think of early adopting from a technology standpoint, it's usually the nerds, right? But then, like, once it becomes a mass market item, everyone
Fine.
wants it.
Once
Look
it
what happened to
comes
the iPhone.
financially feasible,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get everybody to jump on board when it's
No,
like you say 60, 70
home's
grand.
got to be retrofitted for it,
Yeah.
right? Because you got to put the
You got to put
chargers.
220 like a
Yeah.
dryer plug
Yep.
there in your
Exactly.
garage. Yeah.
So it's not like an easy just to do
Yeah.
right away. So there's some work there on housing to make sure that these things are okay. And then of
Yeah.
course there's the news you see around it too. So you talk about the other challenges to adoption is like the house fires because batteries are exploding or the car
Sure.
catches fire in the garage and then all of a sudden the whole house is on like so there are a lot of early adopter type challenges and hurdles that market has to overcome.
I don't think it'd be any secret that I'm not an electric car
Yep.
person. However, I guarantee if you go back and look at the early adopters of cars, they had crazy issues as
Oh,
well of gasoline cars.
yeah.
So it's not anything new. It's not specifically, oh, the electric cars having these problems, so we have to stop making it. No,
Right.
you just figure out what the problem is and you move forward. I
Yep.
guarantee the same things were, that there's a reason that we've got thousands of different cars just because they've gotten better as they come along. It's like, oh, well, we should do
Hmm.
this. Oh, well, if we put this, oh, wow. And then the next thing you know, you get into these more modern eras and you have what I consider some of the most perfect cars ever made. So even though I don't see myself, it's not that I dislike them. I just,
Right. Not for
I,
you.
I don't
They're
think
not
it's
for
there
everyone.
yet. I just don't think
Yeah.
it's there yet. And I'm not saying it won't be in my lifetime that they're there. But there's just, like you said, there's some hurdles. You have to want to do it right now to
Yeah.
where I can, I got 10 gas stations within 5 minutes of my house. You don't have that yet. But when you do, I think it'll be a
It's also a
different
lifestyle
thing.
thing, right?
Hmm.
We've considered it
Hmm.
for ourselves because I mean, I work from home.
Yep.
Wife works a mile and a half down the road.
Yeah.
Like we don't
That's
go
the
far.
perfect setup.
Like,
Yeah.
right? It would become a challenge when we'd have to go on long trips, but right now that's not in the cards. Like if we're going
Hmm.
on a long trip, it's to an airport and we're flying. Which kind of defeats the purpose of the electric car with all the gasoline that gets shoveled into the air through the air. However, it's just it is one of those
That
things
is true.
where
We're not getting electric planes
no,
anytime
I don't
soon.
think so. But it's it makes practical sense for us. But it's there again, it's the having to retrofit a 1930s house
Yep.
to work with the charger and then just like buying that car. I don't know. Car seats fit in a Tesla? No. Not right
Right.
now. It's just it's not going to work and I want more confidence in the company. Um its owner and some other things before making that kind of a jump and maybe seeing what the next new intro is and if they can get beyond like
Yeah.
designs of a 5-year old
Yeah,
as
version
they
version
release
version
their next
five and
car,
version six is going to be way better than version one, two, three.
as long as he's not
They're because
having
they're
his kids continue to draw the like the blueprints for whatever the next car is
oh,
going to be because that side it's a dumpster on wheels. I mean it is a literal dumpster on wheels. So
and I know this would be surprising to you. I love it. I think it's
do
beautiful.
you
It
really
reminds me of a modern DeLorean.
have you
Every
seen
time
them in person
we've got two in the
in the
country
neighbor
in
oh,
Davison County. I am in the country in North Carolina, and every time I see it, I
man
stop and I turn because I'm like, it
I
reminds me of a if John were making the DeLorean today, that's what it would look like.
I
It looks
guess.
stainless steel. It's weird. Look at a DeLorean. It is not normal. It is a weird looking
Yeah.
car. And so
Yeah.
that's when I see it. It's like, oh my
See,
gosh, that's what Marty would be taking back to the future today.
I stop, turn the other way, and throw up a little bit. This is what this goes on. So I've seen a few of them here in Philly, and it's like,
Yeah.
I can't get my head around it. I see it.
Hmm.
I could see how. I don't see why. It's just it's a struggle for me. But hey, to each their own.
Cars in culture, there are certain movies
Oh my
that you
gosh.
don't
Yeah,
even think about the movies per se. You think about
the
the
cars.
car. And I was thinking, like, what are some of those,
There's
movies that are so ingrained in the actual car that you're like, I don't even know this movie, but I know it has this
really cool
car in
cars
it. Yeah.
or a really cool car.
Or a really cool car. And
Yeah.
that's what you associate with. And what did I do? I immediately went, when you say Back to the Future, I, I-
I sat in
DeLorean
that
wasn't even,
DeLorean.
yeah, DeLorean wasn't
Yeah.
even a huge company. He was
Mm-mm.
I think he was with General Motors and he left General Motors to start his own company and he makes some, not a
Yeah.
ton. And then he gets in trouble and, the company falls under. But, that movie literally made that car,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
have that car shows up at again, I tech the magazine
Hmm.
afforded me so many awesome opportunities
Yeah.
to like see cool technology of present day and past day.
Yeah.
We were at IFA, which, if you're not familiar, IFA is an international version of CES, so the Consumer Electronics Show every year in Vegas in January. In the fall, because it's a European show, they do it over Labor Day weekend, and it's not a big deal over there because there is no Labor Day.
Right.
They would have a show, and I mean, it was like the brands you'd expect to see, but also like you're seeing Panasonic with this is like the global Panasonic, not Panasonic here in
Yes.
the US. So you're not
Yes.
seeing just toothbrushes, you're seeing like TVs and refrigerators by
Sure.
Panasonic.
Yeah.
Things you wouldn't anticipate seeing in their booth, and like they take up buildings. So it's not just like a 30 by 30 booth and a trade show floor. Like, so there's some of that, but you know, one of the vendors that were there, and I'll find the picture. And if you're
Sure.
watching the video version, put it over top of this. They brought the DeLorean, so I sat in the DeLorean, and it was cool to be able to get in, and experience that. And like like they had the date and everything. Like it was just a movie prop, but like awesome to get
Oh,
in. But yeah, I mean, there's so many examples of
well, I think you
movies,
even,
right, and
when I
shows.
said, Pontiac, Firebird, you immediately thought of Smokey and the
Smokey,
Bandit.
yeah,
I mean,
hmm
immediately. And he's got a, 77 Trans Am
yep,
that it really even wasn't that great a car. He made it great. That
yeah,
movie is like when you don't see him much anymore, but when you see one, it stops you. Like, oh,
yeah.
look at the
We
giant
have that
bird.
car.
This is
That's one
incredible.
that's one in Dad's garage. Is that car with the black body paint and the gold or yellow, whatever you want to call it,
So iconic,
bird on it. It's
And
incredible.
then like uh when you say, Dukes of Hazzard, you immediately think of a Charger, you
Yep.
think of the orange Charger. And it's just like there was a show in the 70s called Starsky and Hutch. And they
Yep.
had this
I was
Gran Torino
they
or
redid
something
that
like
in a
that.
movie. Wasn't
They
Mark
did.
Wahlberg in that or something like that? Who was someone
It's
random like that?
no, it's a Stiller.
Oh,
Ben
that's
Ben
right.
is yeah, Ben Stiller
Yep.
is, and Snoop is randomly in it as well. Yeah.
That's right.
Um
Stiller
but
and Owen, or what what's his
somebody
name?
like that.
Oh man,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's gonna bother me. Owen Wilson. Yeah, it was Owen
Yeah.
Wilson. Owen
Yeah.
Wilson. Yep. And they look. I just to be clear, like really good
Yeah.
for if you're trying to remake and everything. Like they nailed it with the
But it's
casting
like
there.
when you're thinking about modern, you know, what modern movie is associated with a car?
Not many.
There's really
Uh,
not. I mean, Drive was in the last 5 years. You've got all the Fast and Furious, but those are
yeah,
crazy cars. I couldn't tell you a car that was in there. I couldn't
Gone
go,
in 60
oh,
Seconds has a car. I mean, they've got a
yeah,
lot of cars, right? But there's
yeah,
like Eleanor. There's
yeah.
Eleanor. The Mustang, which that's unfortunately a little. I'm showing my cards for myself
Well,
later on in this
yeah.
episode,
Well,
but
we were at a meeting, a church meeting of some sort, and it was like, what's the icebreaker question? And I came up with the icebreaker as like, if you could have any car from a movie, you know, which one would you
It's the
want?
one.
Yeah, and it was like
Eleanor. For me, it's Eleanor.
Eleanor, and I'm like, I just the DeLorean is tough to beat, but
Hmm.
I know some of the younger guys said that the car in John Wick he has,
Yeah.
and it was like, but it's so cars are just ingrained in our culture. They're just
There's a movie, I say a movie, a
just
series of movies we've talked about that a big part of it is the car.
hmm
Um, you know what I'm alluding to?
go for it.
James Bond. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
you
the
think about
it's
like a guy. He's a character, right?
yeah
But in a series of movies, but within that movie, there's always a car, and like
yeah
Aston Martin was a big
Aston
one
Martin.
back in the day, right?
Yeah,
More recently, I think more to Pierce, it was the BMWs. They had
yeah.
right the
All I could think of
Z3,
was that BMW
Z4,
paid them more or whatever.
yeah, right,
It's
something
like
like that.
yeah, so it
But
switched to
like,
BMW.
there's actually another show we went to. I we were I'm gonna forget where it was, but there was a James Bond museum where the museum had like part of the museum was all of the cars from the movies. Um, and it like to be able to walk through and see just, I mean, I say cars, it's also like vehicles and
Sure,
planes that are hanging from the ceiling and things like
sure.
that. But like that is a massive part. They outfit it in certain ways. Q does his thing to have headlights that pop up with
Oh,
cannons and things like that and whatnot. But like the car is a big part of every one of those movies.
it's so and granted, the '80s are. We've got the A Team van. We've got the Ghostbusters hearse.
Yeah.
You just got
Scooby Doo,
Scooby Doo's his
the
Mystery
shaggin' wagon,
Machine. Yeah, I
or
mean, there's so much cool stuff
Dumb and
like
Dumber
that.
have the maybe that's the
Oh,
shaggin'
that's the shaggin'
wagon.
wagon. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mutton cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's some
Ah.
good stuff with
You
vehicles in
also,
it.
I mean, this is pre you. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Stephen King wrote a book on a haunted car called
Yep.
Christine,
Yep.
and the movie used a 1958 Plymouth Fury,
Oh,
and it was not like there's not a ton of them out there, but man, you see
right.
this thing, it's like as big as a football field, and it's got these huge wings. It's like that may be the coolest car I've ever seen. If that was, that's the perfect car to become possessed to want to get you, right?
Think of a cartoon my dad turned us on to his era growing up, Speed Racer.
Speed Racer.
You know, this is
Yeah,
another one.
the
And
Mach
Mach
5 or
5, yeah.
something like that.
Um,
Yeah.
I think didn't they make a live action? I could be wrong in that, but I thought there was a live action Speed Racer.
Yeah, I think the Matrix team
Kiana
made it. No, the
or the
Wachowskis.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think it bombed. It
Yeah,
was um I remember the kid. I can't
2008.
think of his name. Yeah, I think it's the girl next door kid. I can't think of his name right now, but I think he was the star.
Emil
But
Hirsch.
yeah, it's him. Yeah, but
He's Speed and Christina Ricci.
yeah, yeah, and
Man,
it
Susan
just
Sarandon's in there.
did not
Ariel
do
Winter. Is that
it.
isn't she from
Modern
whatchamacallit? Yeah.
Family.
Modern
Yeah,
Family. Yeah, she's in there.
yeah,
Wow.
yep. But yeah, Speed, man, that a lot. The song, the Go
Yeah.
Speed Racer
Go
song's
Speed Racer.
amazing.
Go Speed
Yes,
Racer. Go.
yes. So
Last
you're
time
like,
that's
ah,
happened.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. So, I
cut,
mean, there's some good
cut.
ones. Yeah,
Boom.
we'll edit that out. No, we won't.
Yeah,
I'll
and
play it
then
over
like
top.
another one
Yeah.
from my childhood, but it was the reason I know who David Hasselhoff is because of Knight Rider and Kit and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
He's got
Is that
this
the
car with
talking car?
it talked to him
Yeah.
and it had rockets and it had the Cylon light as well and
Jeez.
but like Magnum PI.
Mm.
Magnum PI drove this Ferrari 308. Like I don't even know if I've ever seen the show Magnum PI, but I know because of that car, that so cool.
The
Like,
closest thing, and I know we talked about it beforehand. It technically is an '80s thing.
hmm
Um, but I think about Transformers. Is certainly. I mean, obviously, it's based on automobiles that convert into robot fighting robots.
sure.
But specifically the first one, the
hmm
first movie, and Shia and everything, and
Yeah.
like it, you look at it, it felt like a long GM commercial because
Well,
it was like,
let's
they
let's
had
be
the
honest. When you see that modern Camaro come down the road and it's yellow, what's the first thing
oh,
you think?
mm-hmm,
Bumblebee.
Bumblebee. So
Here he
I mean,
comes. He's
it's
gonna. That was there. You go.
yeah,
That's a more modern representation because even to this, gosh, that movie is it almost 20 years old now as
it's
well?
pushing it. It was
The
in when I
original
was in
Transformers.
high school, college time frame. I think I came back on a Christmas break during college, and we went and saw a second or third one. So yeah, it was
Still to this
absolutely.
day, when you
I brought a
see a,
poster. I brought a Bumblebee poster to college. It
there
was
you
like the
go.
entire size of the wall. So yeah, it was high school.
But when
20
you
years.
see that yellow new style Camaro come down, you still
Yeah.
go, it's Bumblebee.
Bumblebee.
That's awesome. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's great. A GM commercial. You
Yeah,
know,
it was like down to the the trucks that were
wasn't
right.
Bumblebee a Volkswagen Bug in the
He
cartoon?
was.
Yeah,
That's why the Beetle.
yeah.
And there's a reference to it in the first movie because there's a Beetle that Shia looks
Ah,
at, and his
uh-huh.
dad's like, no, 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 no. How about or he's like, how about this thing? The dad tries to get him in the Beetle, and it's got like a little bumblebee hanging from the
Gotcha.
tag or whatever.
Yeah.
But he sees the Camaro. He's like, no, this is what I want. Um, and then yeah,
Nice.
like the starts as like the old Camaro, and then
Yeah.
driving down the like Bumblebee's, he like kicks Shy out of it because he makes fun. He hears him making fun of like how it's an old rickety thing, so he like kicks him out of it, does a little donut, spins down a tunnel, and like turns somehow rides on two wheels right
Nice.
by like the new Camaro as it's coming, and then he drives out of the tunnel. It's like there's
Now
your
he's in the
unveiling of the
modern.
new modern Camaro.
Yeah.
So
We like I say, we both come from dads who loved cars, so we have this huge love of cars. It's something different that we've talked about in the past, and we could literally talk about this for days. But I'm gonna try to land the plane, for
yeah,
example, and we're gonna do something a little different, and love to hear from you guys as well. It's like we're gonna do our era as we always do. Which era do we think is the best? But then we're gonna highlight what if we could have one car, from any era, what would it be? And we would love to hear you guys as well. So
I guess since I ruined it, I'll let you truly close it. I already alluded to mine. So
yeah.
Eleanor is the one. Car taste evolves. I think
Hmm.
that's a fair assessment for anyone. Like your
Hmm.
taste in cars evolves over time. If there's been one constant for me and a dream car, if you will, it's always been a Mustang. Like at
Yeah.
some point in my life, I'm going to own a Mustang. Um, and if I had to pick one,
Preferably the older one as opposed to this
oh
SUV
yes,
thing they got right now, right?
right, correct. And the that's where I draw the line with if I ever got into an electric car, I'm not getting into the electric Mustang. So,
Yeah.
sorry, just can't do it. But it is. I mean, Mustangs went through their. You could look at everything we've talked about with how the car industry has evolved and
Yes.
the look of it. The Mustang, one
Oh,
of the only ones that has the vets in there. Vet might have even taken a break for a little bit. Mustang's the one that's every year new version, and you can see how the body of it has evolved, how the look of it, like when they got out of the muscle car era
right.
and what they did to it to keep it around to what it's come back to.
Yeah.
Um, it kind of is a snapshot of every era of the car industry.
That's a fair point
Um,
because in the mid '70s, they don't even they were too ashamed to call it a Mustang,
mhm.
so I think they called it a Mustang two
Two, yeah,
because
right,
they were small and they were putting
yep,
four cylinders in it. It's terrible,
yeah.
But
But it was to
you're
keep the
right. It
name
was
around,
because exactly, and the gas had gone crazy, and so how do we keep going? So from I think maybe 75 to
right?
81, you have this Mustang two, and then in '82 they bring it back, and
Um,
that's the comeback of the muscle
right.
Mustang.
So that's the constant,
Gosh,
but it's also the thing that I've always it's been a dream car.
sure.
For life. So at some point I will own one. If I could pick one, it'd
Hmm.
be that 67, I think was the year in
And gone in 60
Gone in 60
seconds.
Seconds was that. So, I
67 is a
mean, that's
pretty good
the
size one, but it does look good.
oh my God. But yeah, that 60 seconds, Gone in 60 Seconds, the 67 Mustang
Nice.
is the car.
So if that's then what era?
What era? So
Yeah, did you want?
I can't stick to the new car. I think very similar reason. You look at the car I pick.
Hmm.
You know, cars of that era were, I think, peak like awesomeness of the
Hmm.
car industry. Yeah, I mean, you had everything, right? You had God, like all you think of all the great muscle cars that were around, whether it was
Yeah.
the Dodges or the Pontiacs or the Plymouths or like they were all incredible.
Yep.
If I could go live in any era where like that's what was rolling around the streets,
Yes.
it's that late '60s, early '70s era of cars. And not often you're going to
Absolutely.
find Rob Stott saying that like
Yeah.
present day is not the era, but like when it comes to cars, we are not in it right now. So,
No.
and there's a reason why those vehicles are, you could turn on Mecum auctions and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I mean, they
Amazing.
are timeless classics that are still drawing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on the auction block. They are truly investments that the more the closer they are to original factory, whatever they were, like the more valuable they are, because
Yeah.
that's what people crave. That's what like I said, just that's what peak automobiling was
Yeah.
in that era. So I think that for me is the era.
That's a. I love the way you said like when you go down the road now, you can't tell what's what. There's you're sitting at a stoplight and you're around 10 cars and there are 9 SUVs that look the same,
Yeah.
and then maybe one work truck or something. It's just like the what you said about going down the road and every car looking like that would have
Mm.
been amazing.
Oh
So
man.
I will. I love that era as well, but the 80s get hit sometimes for you know bad fashion, bad choices in certain aspects of just the what was going on. And the cars, you don't get a ton of love for the cars of that generation either. But I was sitting there, I was like, in 81, the DeLorean is released. That's a pretty cool car. In 1985, Chevrolet had redone the Camaro and they had the IROC come out.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah,
pretty cool looking
it's a
car.
solid car.
Yeah, and then in I think it's '84, Pontiac comes out with this little teeny tiny car called the Fiero, and it was junk. But by '87, they had really turned it into this amazing little car. You don't even see them anymore. You're not. You probably go, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
If you look up the Pontiac Fiero, it's just a cool looking car, and it led to this wave of little cars. You got the little Toyota MR2 comes out, and the Honda CRX comes out. You even get the little Suzuki Samurai Jeep looking little car. It had this awesome, all these little cool little cars.
It's like I, the cliche sort of like cheap Hot Wheel looking
Exactly.
car.
They're
you know,
exactly what
it's
it
like
is.
right. It looks
Yes.
like if you were to cookie cutter a Hot Wheel car, that
That's
Fiero
a
is what it is.
perfect
Right?
example.
Yeah.
And they sold a ton that first year and they were junk. And so they
Did
struggled
they
after that. And then
did
they
they
eventually
name it like assuming people were mispronouncing Ferrari and they were
must
like
have been
Fiero?
it's something
Like,
stupid like that. But the last year before they kill it, they put a V6 in with, tons of horsepower. It would fly. But
Jesus.
anyway, you had the other, in my personal opinion, the greatest Ferrari ever created was the F40. It comes out in the 80s. It's a beautiful car. They didn't make many of them. And I'm told it's the last car that Enzo approved production of before he
Mhm.
passed away. Like I say, Acura comes out in the mid 80s. That was my first car. It was my second car, so I kind of have,
Yeah.
some love there. You had this,
Has
a
a
lot of
similar look to it, kind of.
yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
does. It is. It's a Hot Wheels looking car as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. But you get like I jokingly say I put this in for my one of my best friends, Braxton. He loved the Plymouth Laser. And the Plymouth Laser comes out in '89, and it was the Mitsubishi Eclipse was the same car. The Eclipse would go on for a long time. They kept that name, but the Eagle Talon was another one. They were all the same car, but it just looked cool, around the '89. And then in 1990, you get the Acura NSX, the Corvette ZR1, and the updated 300ZX. If you look up a 1990 300ZX, you could sell it today and it would still look modern.
Yeah.
It's just a cool car. And then 2 years after that, Dodge comes out with the Viper, which is again, if you saw a
Game
Viper,
changer.
you would think it was made today. It just was way ahead of its time. So I love the '60s era cars,
Mhm.
but when I grew up and I'm reading my Motor Trends and Road and Track and Car and Driver, this is what was coming out.
Yeah.
So I gotta
Your era.
go with
Yeah.
my era, with that '80s era. And even I even had a '60s era car, and that may have something to do with it because you find out, it is junk. It looked really good,
You get
but it was
into it.
not a good car.
Right.
Where you get into, but so that '80s era, '80s into the early '90s, man, there's some
It's an
really,
underrated era.
it is underrated, and so and my one car is gonna, it's from that era, I think, and they make a modern version of it, which is probably even nicer. But the 1990 Acura NSX, I think, is one of the most beautiful cars ever made. And I think they make it for about 8 years. They never really adjusted it much, but it is just gorgeous. In Formula Red, it looks
Kind of has that Mustang
stunning.
side to it too, right? The little
It's
air pocket,
gorgeous.
right?
And to be fair, the guy who designed it for Acura, he actually designed the Honda S2000 as well,
Mm,
which is what I had. So you kind of had this,
yeah.
but like if you look at a modern, 2015 to 2017 Acura NSX, it is literally the most beautiful car ever made. But I'm going to go back to the original. And so if I could have one, I still look, they sold new for 60 grand in
Wow.
1990. Yeah. And now, it's pretty close to the same cost,
Yeah.
so it's like, that's not feasible for a 30,
Which that's
30.
wild, right? Like that's what, you start looking at those older cars and
Yeah.
like the joke is you drive off the lot, it loses $5,000 in value. But
Yeah.
like you hold on to it for 30 years and the
And
value
it
comes
catches
back,
back up on
right?
certain cars.
Right.
It ain't.
So you
I
gotta
hate to tell you
I
this. It
mean
ain't coming back on your
Ford Fusion,
Festiva, your
right?
Fusion. Yeah,
No, I don't think
yeah,
so. But
yes. Or
but
your Hyundai Elantra.
no.
You know,
Poor thing with its foam doors. It's
no.
like, no, not
But
happening.
on your '67 Mustang,
Yeah, yeah, right.
absolutely,
If anything, it's gonna exceed its value.
exactly. It would go back more. But
It's
yeah,
just wild, and that's
you
why. I
know,
mean, didn't get into it, but my dad, like, we've got a collection of them. They were. I'm sure it would pain him to know me talking about it, but like he would use them as investments to help us get
hmm
through college and things like that. Like, big payments due. Like, what do we got? What do I not care so much about that I'm
sure
okay getting rid of? Because they are. I mean, classic
they
cars.
are.
They're like a mini stock market where you have them and you find the right potential buyer. I mean, the value for them can go through the roof. So it's
Wait,
just
you mentioned the micro auction. That is that is quality TV right there
oh,
because
it's
you're just like,
incredible.
it's like living in a dream world. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, so this is they only made 200 with the stick
Yeah.
and this option, and this is one of them, and you're like, oh,
I'll
this is
never have
incredible.
I would love to throw the two of you in a room because I mean I sit there and watch him with him and he'll see something rolling down, the line is what's up next and they haven't even talked about it. And he'll be telling me like this is that and this is like they only did this
That's
to this model in this
incredible.
year and he'll
Yes,
rattle it off. Like I do
yes,
not have that functional knowledge of the car industry that he does
yes.
clearly and it's why it's been a career for him. But like I mean it's wild to sit down and watch and you never know who's either going to be in that room or on the phones
Oh,
watching this auction and just to watch some of them take off the way they do um it's crazy.
but
It's crazy.
I just, if you look at it, 10 or 15 years from now, we've got a
Hmm.
2021 Honda Accord that three other billion of these were made
Yeah.
identical.
Just
But
not the
this
same.
one was blue as opposed to the other billion that were white.
Right.
So what's the bidding going to start? It's just
$30.
not, it's not the same. I
No,
love Honda, and that Accord is an amazing car. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it just is not the same.
world of difference, but
Just and even, and you say, well, that's a practical family car. It doesn't matter. You throw a '70s era practical family car that comes up like, here, this was the four-door version. You're still like, dude, that's still cool.
oh, that's
But
incredible.
too much fun, man. So
Yeah, it
we're
was a
gonna
good
cruise
time.
there out. Let's cruise out in our '67 Mustang and our 1990 Acura NSX,
Sounds
and
good. Blasting Twisted Sisters. This is the
let's
start
go.
of our movie. This is the end
Let's
of our
go.
movie.
This
We're
is. Let's
cruising off
go.
into the
We're gonna
sunset.
cruise. Yes.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate y'all joining us. Like we said throughout, keep the comments rolling, the feedback. Let us know your car and era of choice. What was your first car? All of it. Let us know.
Awesome. Yeah.
And look forward to those engagements. But until next time, keep it twisted.